I love movies. Gosh, I love movies.
We come to this place. Imagine.
I watch a lot of movies.
You did?
Yeah, I watch about a movie a day.
Welcome to Symphomaniacs, a podcast by and for movie lovers. I'm Peyton.
And I'm Andrew, and today we're talking about Her Private Hell. And we're joined by a very special guest and our resident Nicholas Winding Refn expert,
Zach from Zach on Art House.
Hey y'all, thanks for having me on. Super pumped to talk about Refn's latest film and kind of get into his filmography.
Before we get into Her Private Hell, will you please join us for a brief section we call
Added to watch list.
So we just watched the trailer for Avengers Doomsday. What did you guys think?
By just, he does mean about 5 minutes ago.
It's kind of crazy because I came into film watching a lot of Marvel and Star Wars, and that was kind of my introduction to it. And so Endgame was like a really important movie for me, and those Avengers films in general. And they notably all have very memorable trailers as well. And this just made me feel truly nothing. It's just such a dud.
I think that captures it well. I felt nothing.
Yeah.
Captain America coming back, didn't care. I feel like this is probably the weakest Avengers lineup we've gotten. Maybe not in powers, but just in terms of recognizability. We get kind of a glup shit-off. We get Yelena versus Mystique. We get Channing Tatum's Gambit versus Shang-Chi.
I feel like they are going to use the fact that they have Mystique to do so many cool, ironically here, things that they think are cool with you think it's one character and then it's another. I just don't trust them at all to use that well.
I guarantee we're getting like a Chewbacca and Rise of Skywalker situation where we think he's dead and he's not dead, but it's just like she's dying instead of someone else. She's 100% gonna like take someone's place.
Oh, I can see that. I can see them giving Rebecca Romijn a poetic ending.
It's so odd too with the X-Men stuff because they've gotten a send-off 4 times at this point. It's like, why do we keep going back to them? Because those movies aren't ones that people are particularly nostalgic for anyways.
No, certainly not the general public. And speaking of X-Men, so Channing Tatum's Gambit, correct me if I'm wrong, we've only seen on screen in Deadpool versus Wolverine or whatever that was called.
Yeah, in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yes.
So why is he here?
Yeah, well, even in Deadpool...
Because he had a 2-picture deal, that's why.
Even in Deadpool and Wolverine, it was sort of like an in-joke about how 10, 15 years ago they announced the new X-Men lineup and a Channing Tatum Gambit movie was part of it. But that movie never happened.
No.
So it's sort of a joke that he's on like the island of misfit superheroes.
Literally, he's in like movie
But
purgatory.
of course the MCU is like taking that as gospel.
It's strange because Deadpool and Wolverine is just it's a very bad version of it, but it's just a straight up parody. And then this is taking it, like you said, very, very seriously and directly and just assuming it's truth.
They have a very hard cut to his character in the trailer that it feels like is supposed to be something that generates applause, and it made me laugh out loud. It's really embarrassing.
You'd mentioned the Captain America appearance as well, and it's just so strange just that he's wearing a black t-shirt. Just there's no costuming choice really there at all. It's kind of just reverting back to the X-Men movies as well, where they're kind of scared to show these characters in costumes and light a movie, really.
Well, are we going to have 2 Captain Americas? Because Anthony Mackie is now our canon Cap. Again, unless I'm mistaken, I don't keep up with Marvel like I used to. I understand that the conservative backlash to that was such that they need to bring back the white guy. But I also don't understand why he's here. Add him to the Channing list.
I think part of the problem that they're trying to solve is that people didn't really embrace Anthony Mackie's Captain America. But at the same time, they did canonize him as Captain America. So even though they're bringing back Chris Evans, it's just like black shirt guy.
Yeah, that's
They're
not Captain
showing
America.
him just yet in the Captain America uniform.
I think the idea is going to be that he's from some other multiverse as well, too. So, like, maybe there's a twist coming that maybe he's a bad guy or something like that. But it still just feels very odd, especially within the context of the trailer, because it's just like, look at Chris Evans' face. Like, he's back. This is the guy you've been missing.
That's exactly what it is. It's so stupid.
People have responded to the trailer saying that can't be the real Cap. It's just this feels off. That's Loki, that's Mystique. There's no way this is the real Cap. I feel like Chris Evans' return would have more impact if we didn't just see him like 2 years ago in Deadpool and Wolverine.
That cope is giving what people were saying about the Stranger Things finale. Like, oh, that was really bad, actually. But there's a secret one coming out during the Super Bowl. Don't worry. No, they just don't know what they're doing anymore. They've lost the plot, and the content they put out now is bad.
It maybe would feel like less desperate on Chris Evans' part if he had made a lot of good movies since Endgame, but he just hasn't had a particularly interesting career path. Say what you will about Materialist. Ghosted comes to mind and is just like terrible, and that's kind of the exemplifier of what he's done since then.
And Materialists, I think the highlights there are nothing to do with Chris Evans. Sorry to that man.
No.
I think he's good in Materialists.
He's fine. He's not bad.
He's doing his job for sure.
Yeah, he's Chris Evans.
But I agree. If we look at his filmography in the last 7 years or so, wasn't his first major project like The Gray Man with the Russos?
Since Endgame.
Yes. I was like, first in general, no.
First on-screen appearance. His lineup since Endgame is insane. The Red Sea Diving Resort, a film I've never heard of before.
What is that?
Knives Out, which, yes, he's good in. Defending Jacob,
oh my god,
seems like a
Apple
show.
TV.
His cameo in Free Guy. He's in Don't Look Up. I don't particularly remember him being in that movie, but he's credited
Probably playing
on
himself.
Letterboxd. I think so. Lightyear, Gray Man, Ghosted, Pain Hustlers, the David Yates film that's like a ripoff of Goodfellas, but about drug peddlers. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, the Netflix show. Deadpool and Wolverine cameo. Red One, the Dwayne The Rock Johnson Amazon Christmas movie.
Honey Don't.
I think he's good in Honey Don't.
That is a fun role for him. I will give him that. When you look at everything else, Honey Don't is a fun choice, even though the quality of that film is debatable.
Yeah. Then it's Materialist, and then a movie that got picked up by Netflix, Sacrifice by Roman Gavras. His last film was Athena, which was interesting enough. So that's an actual choice, it seems. But that's pretty dire.
Hearing Chris Evans' filmography over the last 7 years does kind of put things in perspective of why he's coming back. Because it seems about 50-50 between Netflix slop and sort of failed artsy attempts. Like Honey Don't, on paper, should have been a good movie, and he was trying his best in it. Unfortunately, the movie didn't really work. But it does make sense that he would return to the infinite money tree.
He is America's ass.
Of course, the root of this whole thing is that they were going to base the newest Avengers film around Jonathan Majors, the Kang Dynasty.
I forgot about that. Oh my god.
With his legal troubles in the real world, they had to kind of scramble and rewrite the whole movie. So then they brought in Robert Downey Jr. to play Dr. Doom. Robert Downey Jr., who escaped for like 2 movies, won an Oscar for Oppenheimer, and then immediately came back and grabbed probably the biggest paycheck an actor has ever gotten.
One of the cringiest things I've seen in recent memory is, and I'm sorry to say this, the reveal of Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom at whatever that Marvel at Comic-Con. He thought he had so much aura doing that, and I just don't think it was there.
Dare I say, I would also do that for $100 million.
Oh, no, absolutely. I don't know if it looked quite as cool as he thought it
he seems
did.
a little too giddy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, for the money, yeah, I'd take that check too. Easily.
Yeah.
Some of his demands, if you actually look into it, it really feels like he's trying to see how far he can push Disney. Just things like, I don't want a trailer, I want my whole base camp just for myself. It really seems like he's trying to see how much he can get away with.
I think that also helps because they're never on location. That might be a little bit harder if they were doing like the Odyssey, for example, and going to a bunch of different countries. But if you're just on a soundstage in London.
That kind of ties into, we'll talk more about in our main movie today, Her Private Hell, because that was primarily on a soundstage and built set as well. And I think, despite my qualms with it, crafts a much more interesting world than it looks like we're gonna get in Doomsday. And speaking of hell, another trailer we just saw is for something called Hellmare, which actually I'd never heard of, and Andrew told me has been being advertised for a couple of years now. but this came across my Instagram feed and just looks like a fun, campy, friends got together to make a horror movie thing that I'm really excited to seek out and watch.
This is very much giving to be original. The poster has an eyeball with a screwdriver going through it. This movie has about 3 taglines, and the first one is just, fuck you.
That's actually what they end the trailer with. It
Yeah.
tells you that.
It definitely seems much more like a micro-budget effort, but the kills seem pretty incredible in the trailer. The trailer doesn't seem to be offering a ton else besides kills in the immediate, but I think that's like a decent way at least to sell your much smaller horror film.
Agreed. And it looks like a weed whacker is this killer's weapon of choice, which we just saw and talked about in Evil Dead Burn. And I think it was very wasted there because honestly, I think a weed whacker could be a very effective horror movie weapon. So hopefully in this one, it'll be used better than just to have some deadites scream around it.
Do y'all go to Halloween Horror Nights?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
So y'all saw about the Evil Dead Burn announcement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That made me so upset because I've been avoiding the new Evil Dead Burn just because I haven't liked the rebooted non-Raimi ones. And so it's just like, nope, I'm skipping this one. And traditionally, like, I'll watch all of the films associated with the houses. And so now I'm stuck basically being like, do I force myself to just go sit through Evil Dead Burn and probably have a really bad time with it?
That is tough because I will say, even if the movies aren't that great, Horror Nights always makes the houses really
Yes.
fun.
Like, I remember a few years ago, Exorcist Believer, they had that house before that movie came out, I believe. Like, that was an October release, and obviously Horror Nights starts late August, early September. And that house was, I think, one of the best ones that year. And then the movie, obviously, was panned by basically everyone who saw it.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, so it's like, hopefully the Evil Dead Burn house will be cool. It seems like the sort of thing where it's so built around kills probably that it doesn't totally matter for understanding the continuity or world of the house.
Yeah, I bet it will be cool. It's still a very brutal movie, and they're in a house that's literally crumbling and rotting, so there's a lot for them to do with the
Okay,
Horror Nights
sweet.
house here.
One thing that won't be a good Horror Nights house would be Ebenezer.
I don't even know where to start with this. This is directed by Ty West, who did the X trilogy. And again, I feel like I can't. The man that made X and Pearl. And God, what are some of his.
House of the Devil.
House of
is
the Devil?
Incredible. House of the Devil is really, really cool. I'm much more lower on the X trilogy than y'all. Like, I never went for Maxine even because I was just so out after Pearl.
I will say Maxine, I could see that as where his downfall began. I kind of was in denial about how bad I thought that one was for a bit because I just love the vibes of X. I think that is the perfect one to just throw on with your friends at Halloween, even in the background of a party or something. I just think that is a cool, well-made movie, and the acting is very good. Pearl, I think, is a step up in that it's such a fun, well-crafted story that adds even more to the world that Ty and Mia Goth have already built together. And then Maxine just completely falls flat on its ass. I just don't understand where it came from, how that happened. I am just so flabbergasted by this. I can't believe it's with Johnny Depp. I can't believe they're trying to sell it as Johnny Depp's return. It looks like a worse version of the Will Ferrell, Ryan Reynolds Christmas movie. It makes that look Oscar-worthy.
It's really funny that I don't think this trailer mentions Ty West's name at all. It just constantly is mentioning Jack Sparrow. Like, they have text. He played Jack Sparrow on the screen as well as the Mad Hatter. So it seems much more like a vanity project for Johnny Depp to get back in the American consciousness. Huh,
Maybe
that's
playing
interesting. Ty West's name is Timon, it seems. Breaking news.
According to Letterboxd.
Yeah, like you said, this is the attempted comeback vehicle for Johnny Depp, who's been out of the public eye for about 10 years now, after his very publicized divorce from Amber Heard, accusations of spousal abuse. The thing is, even if this came out 10 years ago, it just looks terrible. This has, like, Mordecai written all over it. Not a movie I thought I would reference on this podcast.
Yeah, it seems very visually dull and just like look how quirked up I can be. Like, please forget about everything I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, that he's not trying to come back with a serious role. He's just doing the weird little guy under makeup yet again. A role that, even before the controversy, was kind of losing its impact for him.
Even like a year or two ago, he's still been making some movies. He was in Roman Polanski's last film.
What a team up.
It's called The Palace from 2023.
I think the fact that we haven't gotten Pirates 6 maybe says a lot. The fact that Disney hasn't tried to cash in on this at all.
Wasn't it supposed to be Margot Robbie in that?
Margot Robbie and Io Adebiri.
I'll believe it when I see it, frankly. I love the first 3 Pirates movies, for sure. And I definitely think they'll do something with it. The all-female reboot of Pirates of the Caribbean never really seemed true to me. That had kind of like Beetlejuice 2 is coming out energy. But Beetlejuice 2 did come out eventually, so who knows?
I think like the all-female reboot definitely feels like culturally of the mid-2010s when you're getting Ocean's 8 and the female-led Ghostbusters. I think at this point just Hollywood is very scared of conservative backlash to your feminizing this franchise that has largely not been centering female leads, and there'll be some culture war over that. Not to say that a female-led movie would be bad. It's probably much more up to the filmmaker, for sure. But it's just like, it seems that they're specifically scared of it more so than anything at this point.
We have to talk about the tagline of this movie. Because the tagline is, before he was Scrooge, he was, and of course the title, Ebenezer. Which makes no sense. It doesn't mean anything. It's like, before he was Oppenheimer, he was Robert.
He's still Scrooge when he's Ebenezer, and he's still Ebenezer when he's Scrooge.
Also, like, here's the thing about the Christmas Carol. We meet the young Ebenezer. That's part of the story. So, like, I don't know how you're going to do, like, a prequel to Scrooge with a 60-something-year-old Johnny Depp.
And this is just not a villain where it makes sense to give them a backstory that would make them more endearing. The whole point is that this is a bitter, horrible old man who, through the magic of Christmas and ghosts and whatever, I know there's more to it than that, but through that is able to see the error of his ways come around and become someone who gives back and pours into his community and those that have helped him become at the level he is at. To give him something that says, oh, he secretly was this good guy, this misunderstood character the whole time, just completely undermines a pretty classic tale of A Christmas Story.
With that too, it's like A Christmas Story is just all backstory to some degree. Like, it is just about character development with this guy. And it, like you said, it seems very odd to double down on that by giving him additional and potentially different backstory. I will say it would be funny if this was just like a secret musical and they're like, this is like Wicked again or something, because that's the only like comparable thing I can think of where it is functionally like fan fiction about this character.
Again, directed by Ty West.
We had the announcement sometime back that there's going to be a Robert Eggers version of A Christmas Carol. On its face, sounds much better than this. I think I am still somewhat against it just because I can picture in my head what a Robert Eggers Christmas Carol looks like. So I feel like I've already seen it. That's just kind of my take on it. I would wager that movie never comes to pass at this point.
Yeah, I don't particularly care about A Christmas Story anyways like that. Like, it's fine, but it's not a story that I'm going back for in different ways unless you're talking about the Muppets version.
And it's a story we already have good adaptations of, so I just don't know what they're trying to do with this.
It's really the bottom of the barrel at this point if they're going with Ebenezer.
Also, I can't claim they're related, but this is a Paramount movie. Who owns Paramount now? David Ellison. I can sort of imagine a push to say, yeah, let's bring Johnny Depp back in. I used to love his movies.
Yeah, that's a decent point. That doesn't seem like wrong immediately either. Like, there's definitely an argument for that. It just seems very cynical from top to bottom, honestly.
If you want to hear about movies that will probably be pretty good, let's talk about the lineup for TIFF this year. TIFF, for those that don't know, is the Toronto International Film Festival, home of podcast favorite Matt Johnson.
Yeah, when I mentioned TIFF to my dad, he said, Tampa? Toronto.
They could move it there. It's okay.
This is a Toronto hate podcast.
This is not a Toronto hate podcast, Matt Johnson. I love you so much.
So what are you guys looking forward to at TIFF?
I see that Carrie by Mike Flanagan is on this lineup. Is that the TV show that's premiering at TIFF?
Yes, that is the TV show. It's going to Amazon Prime, I believe.
Interesting.
Yes.
Embarrassingly, I did not know that TIFF did TV shows.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like Sundance, where like once in a while they'll program shows like that. They might not be showing the full thing. Maybe it's like a few episodes that they're doing, but they're showing at least part of it there.
Hollywood is very afraid to give us an ugly Carrie. I hate to say that because I don't want to call anyone ugly, but a Carrie that's not conventionally skinny, blonde, attractive. So I am disappointed in that aspect because it is such a big part of, I think, what brings the story to life. With that being said, I do very much trust Mike Flanagan with a Stephen King story. So I have hope for this.
And Samantha Sloyan is playing the mother here. I think if you just look at the Mike Flanagan frequent collaborators, it seemed very clear that this was the right casting for Carrie's mother. In the same way as Robert Eggers' A Christmas Carol, I can already kind of see it. At the same time, sometimes the obvious choice is the right one. I trust in Mike Flanagan to deliver a Stephen King adaptation.
Stephen King trusts him too, and I think that's the most important.
Out of TIFF, I think my most anticipated is probably Bad Lieutenant Tokyo. This is Takashi Miike's new film. I think at this point he's been working on a clip of 2 to 4 movies a year, so he's been making a lot, but particularly excited for this one. Bad Lieutenant is a soft franchise, I guess, at this point, with the first film being made by Abel Ferrara and the second film being Werner Herzog. So it's fun that Neon is backing this version from Miike, who is a very violent filmmaker. I love 13 Assassins from him, hoping this is in a similar sort of vein. It'll be fun to see him do tactical action, hopefully, with it being present day set.
I'm definitely excited to get more Takashi Miike breaking into the English-speaking world. We know he also has this English language movie coming out later this year, I believe, with Charlie XCX. So I'm looking forward to that. I think he's been absent from English-speaking movies for quite a while, so it's exciting to see him come back to that audience, I think.
Has he ever made an English language film?
I don't know that he's ever made an English language film. I know that he has definitely had movies that broke out in the US.
Yeah.
Movies like Ichi the Killer or Audition. And I don't think he's broken out in the US in some time.
I'm excited for Club Kid by Jordan Firstman. He's actually someone I followed him on Instagram for a while, but I first saw him on I Love LA by Rachel Sennett. And this one, I really was surprised to see get such rave reviews. From my understanding, it follows a man who's very much into the go out and party everyday lifestyle that learns he has a child and has to reckon with what that means for the life path that he is on. And studios were going to war over this one, bidding over it from what I've heard. Again, I've just heard nothing but absolutely great things about it.
I just added this one to my watch list earlier today, believe it or not.
You can't keep adding things, man. We're trying to remove them.
I'm also pumped for, as far as genre films go, Your Mother, Your Mother, Your Mother. This is a revenge, seemingly potentially exploitation film from Basan Tariq, and it's starring Mahershala Ali. This is the team behind the potential Blade movie that is now confirmed dead. So they went off in the time that Blade was supposed to happen and then made this movie instead. And it's been getting hyped up a decent amount. It seems like a really cool action revenge film, honestly, so I'm pumped for that.
In the words of Cynthia Erivo, I didn't know that was happening. That's awesome. I was so excited when he was announced for Blade, and then they added Mia Goth to the cast, and it seems like it was all coming together, and then it just went nowhere. So to hear that something like this is what they have been doing instead is very cool.
Just more evidence to the pile that Marvel has truly lost the plot here. They had a Blade movie, they had Mahershala Ali attached to it right after his second Oscar win, and they just couldn't figure out how to make a Blade movie. It's a guy with a samurai sword fighting vampires. I mean, how hard can it be? I did not know that this movie was the Blade team, so that definitely made it more interesting in my eyes.
I believe this one will be coming domestic pretty soon after. I think it's a late September release here, whether that be limited or wide, but it'll be nice to see at least a couple of these movies pretty soon after TIFF.
We're also getting Being Human, from Sean Hayter. Her last film was Coda, which won Best Picture in the COVID weird Oscars year. This is about a disability advocate, potentially a smaller movie, but who knows? We could see it coming for awards season later this year.
That seems like a very easy People's Choice play, at least for the TIFF audience.
Then we have I Play Rocky from Peter Farrelly.
He's making a movie about the making of Rocky. I'm blanking on the name of it, but they made a show about the making of The Godfather for Paramount Plus a few years ago. This is a similar sort of thing, it seems. And the lead actor in this, I don't know his name off the top of my head, but he also played Al Pacino in that show. This seems like a more of a prestige play from Farley, considering his last few comedies have not gone well and have mainly just been direct-to-streaming plays. I haven't seen Green Book or The Greatest Beer Run, so hopefully this is okay. We'll see.
I don't have a lot of confidence in it after the trailer. It just feels very artificial to me.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to accept someone who's playing someone whose mannerisms are as well known as Sylvester Stallone. Even a very good imitation of him, it still just doesn't read as real to me because I'm so familiar with the actual guy.
Yeah, it just reads like an impression or like a cover band.
I think the story of how Stallone got Rocky made is interesting. So potentially they could do something with this. And I did enjoy The Offer.
That's the Paramount Plus show, The Offer.
It was similar. It was kind of a cover of it, but I think there were some interesting things there about the production of The Godfather I didn't know.
This next section is something we call Remove from Watch List, where every week we try to chip away at just a few of the movies Andrew wants to watch on Letterboxd. And actually, Andrew has that at a pretty special number right now. Andrew, what's it at?
This is going to sound like a joke, but it's actually at 55,555.
Angel numbers, baby. So we actually all had the absolute pleasure of seeing something called Motor City recently. What do we think, boys?
You seem the most positive, Andrew, if you want to start.
I would say I was at best mildly positive on this.
Don't say that, Mr. 3 stars.
That's a mildly positive rating.
No,
3
it's
out of
not.
5.
In the words of Paul Walter Hauser, 3 is good.
This is a movie starring Alan Ritchson from Reacher. It is almost entirely dialogue free.
Yeah, that choice just seems like it wants to stand out and be unique in a way, but it's also like a lot of smaller movies have done similar things like that to stand out with. There's a series of direct-to-video films called First Shot, I believe. They're all just like oneers. They're just fully oneer films. And those films work a lot more to some degree versus this. The lack of dialogue doesn't really add anything to the movie, I don't believe.
I would argue that it takes away. There are several scenes where I was sitting there like, no one would not say anything for this long. It is a crime mob sort of movie where Alan Richardson has the misfortune of falling in love with a woman who the city's head mobster views as his property. Alan Richardson is kind of framed for some crimes and sent to jail because of that, and it's his revenge story. And these people would be talking to each other. They just would.
Even like outside of that, it's very odd because sort of similar to the first shot of the film we're actually going to be talking about today, Her Private Hell. The first shot of this movie is really odd because it's just scene setting you in 70s Detroit, and it just doesn't look like it. Like it's very clearly CGI and strangely artificial. The movie has to like put text over the screen telling you you're in Detroit, I believe, during this scene because it's so anonymous. Kind of everything about this movie is slightly anonymous or exaggerated to the point of disbelief. The first action sequence as well, it has so much slow motion in it. To what effect? It was really baffling. I saw this through a screener and I got 25-30 minutes in and I said, no, I'm okay. I'm good at this point.
Okay, so you didn't even watch this movie to the end?
No, I did not finish it. And I normally finish basically every film, but this was a DNF for me. Y'all saw it at the mystery screening, correct?
Yes, we went to AMC Screen Unseen because we mistakenly read Scream Unseen and thought we were in for something spooky. Yeah, this really was a letdown. It took me a bit to realize that this was going to be a pretty much silent film and what kind of vibes they were going for, which I think says a lot in and of itself. But yeah, the filmmakers here, I think, confused good needle drops and slow motion for good filmmaking.
You'd mentioned the wigs before being a particular choice. I don't know if there were any in the first 30-ish minutes, but you mentioned those being particularly rough as well.
Yes, Alan Richardson, just poor guy. And for Shailene Woodley, I feel like they really wanted to cast Grace Van Patten, but they realized that age gap would be too big. So they just said, Shailene Woodley, we're making you look like Grace Van Patten in every way we can.
This was a script that was written something like 30 years ago, went through various versions, including a version with Hugh Jackman that never got made. It ended up being directed by Pazzi Ponzarelli. There were like 8 studios at the beginning, which sometimes can be a good omen. My take on that is that any movie that has that many studios, they had to work very hard to get it made. And sometimes you just find kind of the diamond in the rough. That was not the case here. I think it's actually kind of a case study in the impact that the director and cast can have on the movie. Because you think about how simple this story is, and you look at something like Drive. Now, the filmmakers spoke with Letterboxd recently about their top 10 inspirations. Drive was number 1. You can imagine in the hands of someone other than Nicholas Winding Refn what Drive might look like. Because just in terms of what's on the page, probably the story isn't that far off. There was one action scene I thought was pretty cool. It's a fight between Alan Richardson and Pablo Schreiber in an elevator. For me, that was kind of approaching the Raid type of action. It does come almost near the end of the movie. You said I was the highest on this. I gave it 3 out of 5. And that's mostly just because I found some entertainment in this. I think that Alan Richardson is kind of weak in this silent acting, but I thought someone who was really good at it was Ben Foster. It was funny to see him doing this sort of Charlie Chaplin-esque comedy.
I'm glad you got so much out of it.
There's an epilogue to this movie. We won't spoil it here, but it's so baffling in its concept and execution. It's like something that Mac and Dennis would write on It's Always Sunny. I cannot believe that this scene in this state it exists ended up in the final movie.
You sound incredibly positive on Motor City.
One that actually was worthy of all of the 4 stars I gave it and was recommended to us by our friend Tim is Die Mommy Die. And Andrew, can we get some background?
Die Mommy Die is written by Charles Busch, the playwright. Based on his own play, he also starred in Psycho Beach Party. He plays a once famous female singer who's now become sort of a housewife to a rich husband. And then it sort of plays out as a 50s-esque murder mystery. This is a very campy movie, but still largely taking the premise serious. Definitely they have an affection, I think, for this type of movie that they're parodying. Natasha Lyonne plays the daughter.
Stark Sands is an absolute standout as the son. Every line out of his mouth is absolutely iconic. He was incredible. Frances Conroy has a very fun role in this as well. Some of us might know her from American Horror Story when it was actually good. The twist in this had me on the floor. I thought I knew where this was going, and I really did not. I don't want to give anything away. I think you all should go in completely blind, but this really just went to places I never expected, and every line read was incredible. Philip Baker Hall, the dad, has a mantra that he shares with the family that I am going to carry with me forever. I think this was so awesome, and I never would have seen it if it wasn't recommended to me, so eternally grateful.
I need to watch this. I do love some Philip Baker Hall, so I'm really pumped to potentially check this one out.
Well, you can watch this for free on YouTube right now.
That's the only place we could find it. Ad free to my remembrance, and it really was so
Sweet.
fun.
Huh.
I recently saw Gail Daughtry in the Celebrity Sex Pass. This was a movie we added to watch list a few weeks ago. This is from David Wayne and Ken Marino, 2 of the guys behind Wet Hot American Summer and they came together. I think much in the same way as something like Role Models, the initial premise of this seems very generic, something that appeals to a wide audience. But when you actually watch it for long enough, you realize that they are putting their style of humor in it, and it definitely won me over eventually. I was laughing by the end of this. There were some people who didn't really jive with that type of humor who were walking out, but I enjoyed it. I know someone specifically walked out during the door scene, which is a scene where they're slamming the door on John Slattery's foot and he refuses to move his foot. You see it in the trailer actually, but just in keeping with this style of humor, it goes on for like probably 60 seconds of him just saying ow, ow, ow. And I think that was the moment where someone realized this movie just wasn't going to be for them. For me, with my sense of humor, I think that was about the moment I realized it was for me. So for me, it kind of locked in from there.
Was that also a secret screening? One of
This
the
was
screening
not.
scenes?
I saw this one on purpose.
As far as my watch list, I've been recently going through Abel Ferrara's filmography. I've been doing that in chronological order, and I thankfully just hit the 90s. I had the joy of seeing King of New York and Bad Lieutenant. Truly wonderful films. King of New York is just so strangely stylish, and it feels really in line with a lot of 90s crime films. Like, it feels like an inspiration just as much as Reservoir Dogs is. There's some scenes in that movie where it's just like it blends transgression and pop sensibilities in really cool ways while also just being like a very mean little thriller. Bad Lieutenant seems like something that is more for an art house crowd. It's basically just a character study. There is like some investigation stuff within that as well, but it's mainly just figuring out who LT, the main lieutenant, is just as a person and kind of dealing with his guilt. There's a lot of Catholic themes running throughout this film. It's very in line with a lot of 80s Scorsese. Yeah, those are both wonderful films. I'm excited to keep working through his filmography. Have you all seen any Abel before?
I've seen a few of his films. I've seen Bad Lieutenant, and
Yeah.
I saw that fairly recently in the last year or so, and I really enjoyed it. I think Harvey Keitel is just amazing in that movie. Playing this man who's like barely holding it together.
Well, it's all right.
It's showtime, folks.
And after all of that wonderful film bro knowledge, let's get into the reason we're all really here. Nicholas Winding Refn's return to the big screen in Her Private Hell. To start off with, why don't we talk about our history with him as a director? He has worked on film and television for decades now. Film mostly. He's probably best known for Drive, which I don't care how much it's panned or made fun of on Twitter, is such a perfect, wonderful, beautiful, excellent, violent, gorgeous movie that I absolutely adore and was in my top 4 on Letterboxd for a really long time. That was my introduction to him for sure. I was hearing that Drive was one of those movies almost up there with The Godfather that you just had to watch. And then from there, I think I did Neon Demon, then Only God Forgives. I'm a Gosling acolyte as well, so it was very easy to add that one to watch list. But other than those, I'm actually not that familiar with Refn's work, so I would love to hear your all's takes on his other things.
I think I followed a similar path, actually. Drive was probably the first film of his I saw. The thing about Drive is, at the time, it was marketed very much as an action movie. If you didn't know who directed it, it would probably just look like a higher budget direct-to-video action movie. In fact, there was kind of famously a lawsuit where a woman claimed that the marketing was misleading because she was expecting a movie like the Fast and Furious franchise. And this was a movie I saw on DVD, and I would credit it as one of the movies that kind of expanded my idea of what a movie could be. Because I watched it with my dad, and I remember the movie ending and him sort of saying, that was weird. And I mostly walked away from it with an idea of, I didn't know you could do that, or why did they do that? And it's a movie I've returned to a lot over the years and grown a lot of appreciation for. I went to Only God Forgives next, I believe, and then The Neon Demon, and ever since I've gone all through most of his filmography. I think Drive is probably the one I come back to the most. That or Too Old to Die Young. What about you, Zach?
I came to Refn's films pretty recently, actually. I didn't see Drive until 2023. That was the first of his films I saw. And it was a similar sort of thing that you experienced where it was just immediately like, this is one of my favorite films ever. Like, I watched it, I was just like, I love the energy and romance of the film and just how it holds tone. Like, I'd never seen anyone do that before in a movie where it's just so static. And that's even one of the more kind of active of Refn's films. But I watched that, I loved it, and I didn't dive too deep into his films beyond that for a while. Like, I saw Neon Demon, I might have seen the first Pusher from that point on. And then at the Enzian in Central Florida in 2024, I believe, or 25, they were screening Only God Forgives on 35 millimeter. And at that point, I hadn't seen the film and I was living in North Carolina. So I flew down just to see that projected because I love Drive so much. I had heard Only God Forgives, the stranger's second half, I guess, to Drive. And I adored that film. That was immediately like a favorite of mine. And from there, I was just like, I need to watch the rest of his films. So Only God Forgives is one of my favorites. Too Old to Die Young is maybe my favorite show ever. The Pusher trilogy I watched in full for the first time this year, and that trilogy is incredible. There's a great box set for those films out there too. If you are into physical media, there's great 4K restorations of those. And yeah, I've really grown to find Refn to be one of my favorite filmmakers at this point. He's so specific, and there's just really no one who makes movies like him. Like, you can find reference points for like certain things in his filmography, like William Friedkin, for example. Like, he's kind of all throughout his texts. Farrar is definitely a part of that as well. There's no one who particularly has the same visual language, I guess, as Refn.
I agree with that, and I want to get into this probably more when we get more into the plot of Her Private Hell. But I think that Nicholas Winding Refn is doing with young female characters what Sam Levinson thinks he's doing. Visually, they're going for very similar styles where Sam Levinson just goes for shock value. Oh, I have Sydney Sweeney's boobs here for 10 entire seconds. Nicholas Winding Refn actually knows how to craft such a beautiful shot and to portray these girls in a way, and I'm really speaking about the Neon Demon and Her Private Hell, both of which are very female-centered films that star actresses or women looking to make their way in Hollywood. While I don't think possibly any of the characters are necessarily perfect, he really captures their humanity and fun little quirks or just things that make each of them so unique, and also crafts such a beautiful, glittery, ethereal aesthetic around them that I think actually really is so accurate to how a lot of young women, including myself, have been doing their makeup since like late 2018 through the 2020s, and just kind of gets what looks good and knows what he wants to do and makes it happen in a way that I don't know that I've seen anyone else execute quite as perfectly.
It's interesting too, because like he never really sexualizes his female characters except when a male character in the movie is specifically doing that. Like it never reads as like fetishistic from Refn's perspective. Like in Neon Demon, Elle Fanning is largely under control of these male characters, and it's only during those points where you feel that kind of coming down on her. It feels very negative in those instances. Like it reads as horror. And even like Copenhagen Cowboy, the second streaming show he did, that one went to Netflix. It stars a female character named Mio, I believe, and she's styled in a super masculine way. Like she's always wearing like these big jackets. She has short hair. She doesn't read as particularly feminine. I mean, like a lot of Refn's visual language, like you said, like with how he almost like decorates his actors, reads very feminine. And it's interesting to see this guy who plays with violence and action and like hypermasculinity engaging with the form in a very feminine way too.
I think it's really interesting that someone who started out making mob movies, these very masculine, male-dominated movies, has spent the last 10 years or so of his career making works with mostly female casts, from The Neon Demon to now. I think that as weird as his movies can get at times, Refn seems to be a pretty well-adjusted guy in real life, just from the interviews I've seen. I know that at the time of The Neon Demon, he had a young daughter, and he talked about how the situations that Elle Fanning's character was put through in that movie were situations that, as a father, were very scary for him, that his daughter might experience in Hollywood. I think you can sort of see those ideas through to his most recent work. His daughter, who's now an actress, by the way, she's in Her Private Hell.
What character is she?
She is one of the Candy Floss girls. And I think she actually has a more prominent role in Copenhagen Cowboy.
Actually, knowing that makes me view Her Private Hell in a very different way in terms of the father character.
It's a bad dad movie. Her Private Hell's a bad dad movie, for sure.
I think Refn is a pretty funny guy. There's this interview between him and William Friedkin where he calls Only God Forgives a masterpiece, and then he calls Drive a masterpiece. And
he's absolutely right.
He's right.
He's right, but
he's joking.
Yes, he's being facetious. He's being facetious.
Friedkin, who actually probably did direct a couple of the great films ever, is kind of giving him shit for it, saying, does anyone know a doctor? Can we call a doctor? This man has lost his mind. Also worth noting, this was like a year after Only God Forgives came out. Did not have the reputation that it has at this point.
You can tell me shit if I made Drive.
Okay, when you were mentioning 2001 Citizen Kane, you forgot to add Drive. But we'll let that slip.
We won't know about Drive for another 30 years.
30 seconds.
Whether it lives or dies. I'm talking about films. 2001 was made in 1968.
I made this film about 4 years ago, so it's about
4
time.
years is a zip. It's not even a blip. It's not a pimple on the asshole of humanity. 4 years. But 2001 was made in 1968 and holds up like gangbusters. It's better than all this other similar crap. And Citizen Kane was made in 1941.
We know that. My point
and it lives.
And I just want to say that, we met in an online forum, and when I saw that Too Old to Die Young was in your top 4, I immediately was like, okay, this guy's interesting. Like, this is someone that I can talk to about movies, because I don't know many people who've even seen that miniseries, let alone would consider one of their favorite miniseries.
Same. I remember saying in that chat we had to watch Her Private Hell together, and then we did.
Yes. I appreciate that. Too Old to Die Young is, like, if I had to put down a sight and sound list, like, it's on there. That in particular, I think, is like the best form of Refn because you get the length of it. Compared to his movies, which are obviously all under 2 hours, that gives you 12 or 13 hours. And it's really cool to see how he uses duration to tell stories. And also, probably the only time he will ever have a budget over $10 million for his entire career, honestly, because I believe that was like an $18 million production. And it's nice to see him work at scale to some degree.
I would argue that $18 million isn't even that much, considering how much that series encompasses.
Yes. Yeah, they're everywhere.
The first time we met in person was at the Only God Forgives screening.
Yes, it was.
Flew in specifically for that. So as soon as we put this movie on the calendar, I knew that we had to reach out to you.
I forgot about that. It's so funny.
Pretty soon, Drive is coming to the NZ, and we're very excited to see that one. We already have our tickets for it.
Pumped.
Well, are we ready to get into Her Private Hell in earnest now?
Yeah, let's do it.
When this was announced, I was already intrigued by the Nicholas Winding Refn of it all. And then the cast was Sophie Thatcher, Havana Rose Liu, Christine Frosef, Charles Melton, Diego Calva, and as I've said on this podcast before, if you've heard other episodes, I am a huge Yellowjackets and Riverdale fan, disciples of both shows. They both have had huge impacts on my life. And so the fact that this stars Sophie Thatcher, who is in Yellowjackets, and Charles Melton, who comes into Riverdale actually later in the show, but is one of the bigger breakout actors from it. I just could not wait to see this. I couldn't believe they were cast together in a movie by a director that I hold to such high regard. And Havana Rose Liu is someone we've talked about a lot on this podcast as well. She's in a favorite of Andrew's and mine, Bottoms. She is just such a scene stealer, an absolute showstopper in this. Christine Froseth, I haven't seen in a really long time, but I really enjoyed her in, it's a John Green adaptation on Hulu, The Alaska Book. She's in that, like Return to Alaska or something. I don't know. But whatever that's called, she's in that and she's excellent. And so she's kind of had a special place in my heart since then. She blew me out of the water in this. I couldn't believe how much she made me enjoy her character, that really, if the acting wasn't that good, I wouldn't have liked that much. Diego Calva, sexy. DeGray Scott, spooky. This was a Nicholas Winding Refn movie. Let's get into it.
What he's looking for in performers is people who are willing to do to be different. And it was for some people, it's very outside their comfort zone. You could see them, because he's just telling them to slow down. He doesn't tell them you have to do it like this. It's more just like, take your time, slow down. You got all the time in the world, we'll do as many as we need. And then everyone eventually just kind of just relaxes and goes into this zone. So no, it's dialed in, but it's more just like they have to relax first, because I think in American, especially in TV, a lot of them are doing TV. They get one or two takes. They just need to get their lines out. And Nick will do like 17 until he hears the rhythm that he wants.
You mentioned DeGray Scott. He feels like directly out of Blue Velvet in this film. Specifically like the one scene where he's telling the story of the Leatherman when he's standing over the lamp. You're just like, yep, that's Lynch all right.
I think DeGray Scott's most famous role is probably Mission Impossible 2, where he plays kind of the mirror image of Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt. Famously, he had the role of Wolverine in X-Men, and he had to be recast because he was reshooting Mission Impossible 2. And so now we know who Hugh Jackman is. So you can imagine an alternate career where DeGray Scott is like one of the most famous actors, just this huge heartthrob of the last 25 years. And I kind of get that sense in the way he's playing Johnny Thunders, aka Daddy, in this movie, because on the one hand, he does feel like a bit of a lecherous creep, but you can also see the sex appeal there. You're like, I get this. Like, I get it.
His performance and Sophie Thatcher, who plays his daughter, and the women surrounding him as well, do such a good job in that you immediately feel how much you want to impress this guy.
I'll say this. The Refn who made Too Old to Die Young would have given like 2 dedicated episodes to Johnny Thunders. We could have had a whole movie of him here, and I would have been satisfied.
Andrew tried to sell Too Old to Die Young to me by saying, oh my god, in that show, you would get a whole episode about a character and then never hear from them again. It's like, I don't know if that's a selling point.
It is such a plus within the context of that, because it really just like throws you into these random places and without context, and it just expects you to learn to swim within that environment. And it's really cool how it just constantly like reminds you like, hey, like you're okay without context here. Like it sort of teaches you how to watch that show as it progresses, because it is so alienating at times, especially later in it. So like those first few episodes, as they switch from character to character, make these little mini movies, which like do stand alone in a really strange way.
I can see that. I was actually saying to Andrew earlier today that I do respect Refn's continuous want and ability to show rather than tell you. I feel like especially in the world of Netflix that is literally having shows explain things to people in the assumption that they're folding laundry and on their phones while watching. It's very refreshing to see a filmmaker either put so much trust in his audience or say, I don't care. This is my vision, and like you get it or you don't.
I haven't seen it yet, but like the Odyssey, which is coming out, and that direct, Christopher Nolan is always about everything has to look real, everything has to feel lived in, everything. And so that's his baseline. It has to be real. The first shot of our movie is totally whack. You just look at it and go, well, I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
So in a way, that buys you the rest of the film, because you're like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and then there's like one scene in this film where they meet up with Nico Diego Calva's character, the girls do, and he's like, or actually, Hunter, Christine Frost's character, is like, we're gonna go to the uniform party, and normally in a Netflix show or something like that, they're going to explain to you what the uniform party is, but then instead with this, you just see them in this like really dingy looking elevator, and then the camera just does like a full 360 in just like the slowest manner possible, and it just expects you to get on that wavelength. Once again, really abstracted, and this movie does not want to give you context at all.
This is one I actually wish we got a bit more context for, just because in a lot of the lead up to it, it's called the uniform party. And all of our characters are saying, oh, you know what happens at the uniform party? And then we get to the uniform party, and some stuff happens for sure, but what does happen is kind of only happening because of the journey that our characters are already on. So I wanted to know what happens at the uniform party. Tell me.
One of my criticisms of this movie would just be that it kind of feels small. We hardly ever meet any characters outside of our main cast. You know, even when they go out in public, there aren't a ton of extras or anything. I think of other movies like Only God Forgives or Drive, where even though those casts are also quite small, we do see a world around them. You know, the fact that they're making a movie within this movie and we never see the crew or the director, we still only see this movie through the perspective of our main cast. You know, it almost gave me the feeling of like a COVID era movie where they, for health reasons, couldn't fill in their scenes, but here felt maybe more like a creative choice or a budgetary reason.
Actually, on that, so before the release of this film, I interviewed Matt Newman, the editor of this film, and he's edited all of Refn's films going back to Bronson. He talked about how that artifice was an intentional choice for Refn. I do agree that, like, especially in the movie part of this film, like when they're making their own space movie, their own little Mario Bava film, it does feel small there, and you do feel like some limitations of production at that point. But especially when you're cutting to Charles Melton's character, Private K, and his story, the kind of odd spaces that he's going through feel like a feature, not a bug, where he's just kind of like, I have this one hallway I can go down. I'm going to go down this hallway and kick ass down that hallway.
He put in that crazy stunt guy that looks like a sumo wrestler who Charles was kicking him all day. The guy was totally cool with it. It was hysterical. He brought over a Japanese stunt team, and they were amazing. He absolutely loved them, and they were completely bonkers. And they do stuff that I think American stunt crews won't do. They just throw themselves at each other.
So there are, I think, some limitations, but also some pluses to that scale.
I think this is a filmmaker that a lot of people will say is style over substance, and I can't say that they are entirely wrong, but I think this is also someone that you know what you're signing up for when you sit down for one of his movies. Not everyone, of course, but especially cinephiles like us. And I think that when you really dig under the surface, there is so much story here, but even when there's not, this is just the most beautiful film I've ever seen. I don't think there's a moment I wasn't absolutely mesmerized. And another thing I was saying to Andrew earlier is that there were times where I was like, honestly, is this necessary? No, but it's so beautiful. I would be devastated if I wasn't looking at this shot right now.
That's the thing. Within Refn's filmography, the style is the substance, and indulging in that duration makes that style even more interesting, and makes you focus on that element of it too, where you are like engaging with the movie beyond just receiving narrative and receiving plot. Like you are paying attention a lot more to those very slow camera movements, and it, like how the light structure changes in a shot, like you're noticing those shadows a lot more, and kind of like, especially in the uniform party, it's basically just neon lights hitting them over and over and over, but it's all these different patterns. It's bringing different emotions to the forefront. There just straight up isn't anyone who's making movies like this now.
I honestly don't know how much went into the styling and characterization of our three main female characters, who again are Sophie Thatcher, Havana Rose Liu, and Christine Froseth. But I think particularly in the uniform party scene, but really the whole time, Christine Froseth is just so awesome. She is playing an actress that really hasn't built up her career yet, like Sophie Thatcher, who is a Nepo baby, or some of these other actresses she's working with. So she is coming in kind of fresh-faced and just really excited to be here, and definitely giving off an air of desperation, willing to do anything she can to help her star rise. And Sophie Thatcher's character has a line that says, "How can someone be so attractive yet so unfuckable?" That was a very funny line, first of all. Some of the dialogue here is hilarious. But also, I think that Christine Froseth just absolutely understood the assignment here. I think if she wasn't completely dialed in to what this character needed, it wouldn't have worked as well, because she is coming across almost like, I don't know what the word for it is, but you really can feel that she will do anything to continue to move forward and to escalate. And the desperation, while she is this obviously gorgeous and talented girl, but you really do look at her and you just feel pity, especially in comparison to Sophie Thatcher and Havana Rose Liu, who just walk in and take your breath away.
It's funny you mention that line, because after that it immediately cuts to her and Nico in a room, and Hunter's on all fours and just like waving her hair around, and it's the funniest thing in the world, because she does seem desperate, but not in a cloying way. Like, there is something endearing about her eagerness to engage with the world around her.
I thought she was awesome in this role. She really makes this character likable, this sort of new to Hollywood starlet who is maybe not as jaded as Sophie Thatcher or Havana Rose Liu's characters. When I first saw Hunter, I felt like they were styling her to look a little like a younger Margot Robbie. It reminded me a bit of just the way that Margot Robbie came onto the scene, or even the character she played in Babylon, where it's kind of like, okay, I'm new to Hollywood. I still have a ton of hope for how this is going to go. And so she's trying to take like every opportunity that's presented to her. At the same time, she's almost too naive to know kind of some of the social mores, which makes for some of the funnier moments in the movie, like when she just asks Daddy straight up, like, who's the leather man, when everyone else kind of stares daggers at her, like, you're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to talk right now.
I really like, too, when she asked the stylist to poke her in the eyes with the needle of success.
Love that.
Also, going back to Babylon, we have Diego Calva in a small role of Nico here. And in the past couple of movies he's been in, my comment for his introductory scene has been, wow, they filmed that in such a way that they're really highlighting how hot Diego Calva is. But I think Diego Calva just takes my breath away every time he comes on screen, and he's not just being filmed like that.
I mean, this movie too, I think that is specifically the case here, because in this, they're introduced with Elle, Dominique, and Hunter all barking at each other like dogs, and then it cuts to Nico, Diego Calva's face.
Cut to me barking.
I think that's kind of the intention of... Refn finds him just really beautiful to look at, and he's great as essentially candy for the girls within the movie.
Mm-hmm. Candy for the candy floss girls.
Yes.
I think his role in this movie is basically to look hot, to pose the question of, would you cheat on your husband with this man? And like, yeah. And I think Refn just makes everyone look beautiful here. All the girls, all the men, and honestly, the men, I think in a lot of cases are the ones that they linger on. Refn is a straight male filmmaker. He focuses a lot on men's bodies at times and, puts the male gaze, if you will, on them rather than the ladies. And I think that's definitely the case with Charles Melton and with Dougray Scott and Diego Calva here.
That's a very good point. I think this is a film where we have some girl on girl action. We have a lot of very sexual scenes, but I would say that Diego Calva and Charles Melton especially get more objectifying shots than any of our girls do here.
Charles Melton as Private K during the second fight he has within the film. Refn shoots him like he sexualizes him basically as far as you can without putting him in a sex scene. It's crazy. He's just like, look at how hot this man is, and he's so interested in that. With sexualizing him, it's not showing him from like, oh, like this is like the feminine ideal of what a man should be. This is Refn's ideal of what a man should look like. It is turning that male gaze specifically on another man more so than the female gaze, which I think is really interesting in his case. And Melton is very up for the challenge here. He's totally game, which is great.
Oh yeah. I would love to talk about what Refn said about Riverdale. So, as I mentioned before, I am a lover of Riverdale, the show. It is a child of David Lynch and everything good in this world. And some of the actors have gone on to do some really interesting things. Lily Reinhart specifically has done some really awesome things with her career. KJ Apa is playing Jimmy Stewart in a biopic produced by Angel Studios. So, we're going different directions.
That's a choice.
Charles Melton, I personally feel, was robbed of an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor when he was in May December a couple of years ago. But Nicholas Winding Refn recently said in an interview that his daughter, like me, is a big Riverdale fan. And so he made a deal with her where he said, I'll watch Riverdale with you if you'll watch some movies that I pick out. Which, drop the movies that you showed her, please. I would love to know what those are. But essentially, he said that as soon as Charles Melton came on screen, he was just mesmerized by the brand of masculinity that he brought. And he knew immediately that that was Private K. There was no question. And Charles, of course, was like, yes, I'm down.
Melton feels like an actor that I'm just going to follow for the rest of his career at this point, because he just makes such cool choices with Warfare and May December, and now working with Refn as well with Her Private Hell. He has good taste, I think. And it's nice to see a young actor approaching making movies with that, considering he filmed a lot of TV and hopefully he's getting a lot of residuals from Riverdale. How far did you get into Riverdale? Did you finish the entire series, or?
Oh, I've the whole thing several times.
Wow.
That show has supported me on several depression journeys.
Nice. I think I've only gotten through season 3 before, when it was coming out. And then from there, it definitely got a little silly for where I was at that point.
Oh, it's
but
absolutely insane.
I would be down to revisit it for sure, because it is such similar to Refn, a very unique object.
It's a show, us and Joe should do a drinking game. That's the kind of show, and then you point out all of the references that they're directly copying, but somehow also making absolutely transformational.
Yes.
Charles Melton famously called it his Juilliard, and several of the other actors have since publicly agreed and said, yes, that's actually what it felt like. And I think that's perfect. They put them through every kind of situation you can imagine, from an actually very good murder mystery first season to ripping off the Marvel multiverse in their final one. It is just everything you could ever want in a TV show. Everyone is hot. If you just need to turn your brain off and watch something that's going to entertain you, put on Riverdale.
You talk about Riverdale being his Juilliard. That's a path that actors really don't have a lot these days. Just a show where you're making 20 to 25 episodes a year.
Yep.
But some of our best actors came up that way. Julianne Moore used to make soap operas. I definitely find Melton to be one of the more exciting actors working right now. I think Robert Downey Jr. is walking around with Melton's Oscar. But, Charles Melton isn't playing Dr. Doom right now. He's still doing interesting things like this. He also was really good in Beef, which we watched recently. Even if he maybe didn't get the awards attention that some people felt like he should for May December, he's making a lot of really great choices.
Havana Rose Liu is also someone that really stood out to me in this. I think from the moment she comes on screen, she's just mesmerizing. Her first couple lines, I think, are in the trailer. They sounded pretty familiar when she first said them.
It's the Stardust monologue. Correct?
Yes. That's going to be my new morning mantra into the mirror, let me tell you. That was incredible. But she is playing the stepmom and former best friend / possible lover of Sophie Thatcher's Elle. And their relationship is incredibly interesting.
It's really unique because I've seen the movie twice now. And the first time I had a really hard time just like tracking their dynamic throughout the film. They're so central to the film, and formally the movie is like very obviously slow in their parts, just like all Refn movies and stuff. But like you have a lot of time to just like sit with them and try to like figure out what their deal is. And by the time you're getting to their scene on the balcony, that kind of is their emotional reveal of how they feel about each other, where they are like both seeking connection and up to that point have just like refused to been able to engage with that. It's really strange within a Refn movie to see people be so emotionally vulnerable, because you normally just don't get that in his films at all. It plays with the score as well from Pino Donaggio. He's done a lot of work with Argento and Fulci and De Palma. You have an emotional through line to this movie that you normally don't find in most Refn films.
I think speaking of Donaggio's score, it's interesting how romantic his score is almost. I think even in the murder scenes, it's not really what you would consider to be a typical horror score. It's almost like a sweeping, Gone with the Wind romance scene or something whenever one of these girls gets their chest ripped open.
Yeah, it's definitely like orchestral melodies that they're doing. Newman was saying in the interview that they were initially going to approach Cliff Martinez to do an orchestral score. Martinez has done the scores for basically every Refn project since Drive, but then for whatever reason ended up with Donaggio. And I think he fits it perfectly. Those melodies do feel right, especially with like how artificial the film is, like we said, like being on sound stages and all that. So you do get like this like 40s, 50s like melodrama kind of going throughout it. It does feel a little bit like Douglas Sirk almost, obviously with these very abstracted touches. But his score is a real beautiful thing to hold on to throughout the movie. It grounds the audience, whereas like a Martinez EDM beat probably doesn't do that as fun as those normally are in Refn films.
At points when I feel like maybe a scene is going on a little long, the score will kick in and I'm just spellbound once again.
It grounds the audience as we're transitioning through a number of genres almost. From the main plot with Our Leading Ladies, which is kind of this commentary on modern day Hollywood, to this Sirkian melodrama, to this giallo plot, to like a Yakuza revenge movie with Charles Melton. At times, it feels like we're watching multiple movies at once that are just kind of going on at the same time. One feeling I had coming away from this movie is just that I never felt like Charles Melton and Sophie Thatcher were in the same room. And I couldn't quite tell on one viewing whether that was a creative choice or whether this was just a very practical consideration. Like, they literally were not available at the same time. But for me, their storylines seemed to take place simultaneously. They didn't seem to really intersect.
From what Newman was telling me, they were originally like fully separate entirely. And then at some point within, I don't know if it's pre-production or production, the decision was made to kind of intersect those stories a little bit more, kind of, especially when like they're cutting through them throughout the film. Like you're getting the private K lighter that Elle has. You're getting this shot of Elle kind of looking off into the distance and Melton appearing. Their timeline is interesting as far as like when they're going on. Like what's your guys' interpretation of that? Like how does Elle come into possession of the private K lighter?
I honestly did not have an explanation for the lighter.
Okay.
My understanding of the film essentially was that We meet Elle and Havana and Christine, or Elle, Dominique, and Hunter, who are going to be working on this movie together and have very close either familial or now workplace relationships. We meet Elle's father, who is introduced as some kind of very big name in the movie industry, gives us the fairy tale of the Leatherman, and then immediately disappears. So my take on that was he's definitely the Leatherman, but then they just never they never went anywhere.
I felt like he was going to be the Leatherman for sure. It felt like a twist that they set up and just never paid off. I don't think they ever reveal who the Leatherman is. They just kind of keep him as this like supernatural entity.
I truly thought at the end when the Leatherman, Private K, and Elle are all together and there's a face-off, that Elle was actually going to get Private K with the axe, and that was going to be the twist, that it was because the Leatherman was her father. But no,
So I think like that is all kind of correct. My interpretation is that one, like Private K is Johnny Thunders, just like an earlier version of him. Like I think Private K's story is taking place in the past, and then they're meeting up in this surreal diamond location. He's finding his daughter there, which I believe to be Elle. And then when you're getting the Leatherman's appearances throughout the film, especially like in the uniform party, Melton's Private K is stuck in this like cage. I think he and Johnny Thunders are the Leatherman as well, but that's just like while they're hunting for their daughter who might be Elle. There's this element of time too where they are kind of like intersecting at the end, almost like they're doing what's the Tenet term, like a pincer,
a temporal pincer.
I think they're doing some sort of temporal pincer movement here where they are kind of meeting at the midpoint at the end of this film. She gets the lighter out of Johnny Thunders' jacket, which resembles a lot the one that Private K dons after the second Yakuza fight. That's my interpretation, at least, of like how it like physically tracks.
That does make sense to me, with them both looking for their daughters and then kind of the parallel of the journeys that the characters take.
Yeah, because like there is like an emotional resonance, I think, to the end of this movie that Refn normally doesn't go for. Like it's not normally something he's really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
That reunion that they eventually get to is like really beautiful. I think their absence as well after that is also interesting, as Elle is just left on her own with the Taylors or the Leatherman's foxes.
I think you could almost see it as a nocturnal animals thing, where one story is kind of this abstract, metaphorical representation of the other. Because I think if we try to find a more literal connection, we might kind of lose our minds.
For sure.
In the discrepancies.
Yeah, I agree. Like, in general, I think that's what's so cool about this movie is just how abstracted it is. And it's not interested in, like, Joel to Die Young. It's not holding your hand through any of those cuts and different movements to different genres or different characters. But it has a similar sort of tone throughout it all, with that Pinot score that, like, holds together both the emotions and just, like, the literal tracking of where you are and what's happening.
And I would always rather have a filmmaker just kind of throw me into it and let me find my own footing than hold my hands and treat me like I'm stupid. So I'll always take something like this over that.
One thing I found really interesting about Charles Melton's character is he almost feels like a version of the earlier Refn Ryan Gosling characters. Just kind of this hyper-masculine, heroic figure. I think one thing about the men in Refn's films is they're very concerned about appearance. Going back to the driver in Drive, he has this kind of uniform he puts on whenever he goes to do a heist. And here you have Charles Melton's character who has to straighten his uniform after every step he takes.
It's so funny whenever he straightens his uniform.
It's funny.
So good.
And then later on, you have him putting on this leather jacket with chainmail, as if the jacket is his new armor. I also thought it was interesting in comparison to Ryan Gosling's Only God Forgives character. You know, that was a character who was very flashy, kind of saw himself as being more of a threat than he actually was. and the moment he gets in a fight, he's easily defeated. There was one line that really stood out to me in connection to Only God Forgives, when Johnny Thunder says that the only way to kill the Leatherman is to cut off his hands. I immediately thought of Only God Forgives, where Gosling's character has to give up his hands at the end to kind of atone. What do you guys think is the connection there?
I just thought Refn loves to cut off some hands.
I think it is one, that, and also just the idea of masculine figures committing violence through hands. Like, that is just like the physical manifestation of hands and violence. And this one, like the Leatherman, like he rips open chests with his hands too. Whereas Gosling in Only God Forgives, he really only punches. He doesn't really use a gun or a sword or anything like that in that film. So they're both largely combatants with their hands. That's the connection that I found between those.
That's interesting because, you know, there's this read of Only God Forgives where Gosling's hands are his masculinity. You know, the one time he has a chance to actually use them, he's impotent. And at the end of the movie, he's castrated to atone.
Mm-hmm.
And here you have hands as kind of an instrument of violence against women. I do think this whole thing is interesting to consider through the lens of Refn is a father in his 50s who has a 20-something daughter in the industry. I think he's definitely aware of the threats that are posed to them and like just the way that creepy men in this industry can take advantage of them, more so than himself being one of those men.
I was thinking I would be so interested to learn more about the creation of the scene near the end of the film where Elle and Dominique are in the apartment, penthouse. I don't really know where they live, but where they are in their home together and the Leatherman is coming to get them. And we are just coming off of a scene where Elle physically attacked Dominique and Dominique had to pick up a knife to defend herself against Elle. But as soon as the Leatherman is coming, Dominique just kind of throws that all away and is running to Elle for help again. Unfortunately, Elle chooses not to come to her aid here. But I thought this was so true to life in that you can get into these just insane spats with your female friends. I've never had one pull a knife on me, but just how no matter how heightened the emotions can be there, it will always be scarier to be in the physical threat of a man or someone that you know is going to be able to physically overpower you. And that felt so true to life in the way that you could just immediately forget about what had just happened and feel the need to come together to kind of fight this off, knowing it'll be easier and you'll be more powerful as a pair. Again, I don't know how much of that was Refn, but it really was well done.
But it's also like, I don't know if the movie totally is saying that because Elle does not come to help her.
I'm not saying it's a moment of female triumph. I'm saying in terms of Dominique's character, just immediately forgetting what has happened and being like, Elle,
yes,
oh my God, you're going to
Dominique's
help me.
Yes.
I thought that felt so true to life.
Got you. Okay, yeah. Elle is very complicated and throughout the entire film, honestly, but especially in the end, where she does make that active choice to not open the door for Dominique. And then also, if you get into the actual like full stop ending of this film, she's left with the choice of whether to take on the diamond studded leather gloves of the Leatherman or not, in a very Twin Peaks, The Return, The Beast sort of way, where it just like cuts to black off of that. What do we think Refn is saying with that?
I think if we're looking at it in terms of a movie where he's definitely talking about violence against women and the way that can echo, or even just generational trauma and violence passed down between families, I think it's a choice for Sophie Thatcher's Elle to carry on this legacy. We are told and shown, I think, very effectively her father has built. Not that he's, I mean, I do think he's the Leatherman, so he is horribly violent in that way, but not that he's this Richard Ramirez type figure outside of that. But does Elle want to carry on acting in a way that is horrible for and abusive to both herself and the people around her and that she loves? Or does she want to make a choice to separate herself from this behavior that has become a part of her lineage?
That's also like in direct contrast to Only God Forgives, when Gosling gets his hands cut off. That is like a direct end to that cycle of violence. So it is interesting to see, like, with a woman, Refn is giving her perhaps more agency in that choice compared to a masculine character.
I think if you see this movie as being Gialli as sort of a metaphor for Hollywood, you could also interpret it as her father has been someone with a lot of power in the industry. He's taken advantage of a number of girls. And now she's a young girl, but she's come into a position of power where she herself can start victimizing other people. So it's like, will she continue that cycle of abuse or will she end it?
This is good to hear because I really didn't really know what to do with the ending both times and sat through it until we're talking through it now.
I do wish they had told us if the Leatherman was her dad, or at least we had seen her dad again.
Yeah, it is odd that he like fully disappears. Does he appear at some point later within the film or no? I'm trying to think.
Well, yes, because he's a Leatherman.
Yeah, does Johnny Thunders as himself appear
No.
later in the film?
No.
I
Okay.
love the moment when the Leatherman gets Superman laser vision. That was fun.
Yeah, the whole design of him is so beautiful. There's one shot toward the end when there's like a tight close-up of the Leatherman's jawline, and it's just like all these like beautiful sparkles and diamonds on there, and it's just like Refn can provide really interesting textures when he wants to.
Just have any last words on this? Or
I absolutely loved the makeup, costumes, styling, set design. I could go on and on about how beautiful this movie looks, how beautiful the actors are, and how incredible the makeup is. I can't wait to, just for my own pleasure, do a makeup look inspired by a lot of what Sophie Thatcher is wearing throughout this. Kind of whimsical looks, a lot of big black eyeliner, and even Hunter specifically. She is obviously beautiful. She's played by Christine Froseth and looks good the whole time, but to the point of the line that she is so attractive yet undesirable. Her fits and her looks are always just a little off, or the look of someone who is trying a bit too hard to be there, where Sophie Thatcher and Havana Rose Liu, for the most part, are giving old money, like they know what's up, had Cher's closet in Clueless ready to dress them head to toe. Even though I definitely couldn't sit down and explain to you in detail everything that went on in this plot, I just love the modern fairy tales that Refn, I feel, continues to make.
I think there are a number of things about this movie that have me reserved about it, where I'm not quite in love with it, where I am in the same way with Drive or Too Old to Die Young. But I think at the very least, there are so many beautiful images here. The score is just stellar, and I thought all of the actors were really impressive here. This is a movie that Refn made in Copenhagen. He seemed to self-finance it, at least in part. And I think this is a movie where he pretty much got to do whatever he wanted. And I'm always going to support artists being able to just make the movies they want to make, even if it doesn't quite end up how I would want it to be.
So you're a big Megalopolis fan.
I've seen a lot of people comparing this to Megalopolis. I think just because it is like so awkward at times. I think the awkwardness in both those films comes from very different places with very different intentions.
On 1 to 5, 5 being Megalopolis, this is like a 2. I don't think that it's quite a 1-to-1 comparison. I think it's a much better Gialli riff than Last Night in Soho is.
I still haven't seen that film. The Running Man really turned me off of finishing the Edgar Wrights I haven't seen yet.
I think Last Night in Soho is much better than The Running Man.
You think Last Night in Soho is better than Her Private Hell?
I think it probably has more rewatchability.
Interesting. Obviously I haven't seen that film yet, but like I think Her Private Hell is like deeply rewatchable for me in a way that just like I love the energy and pace of the film, where it does just like take its time and it feels like something you can just like sit in, and it is experiential cinema. It is something that you're not coming to it for plot specifically, like you're coming to it for this like gorgeous world for all of these costumes, for the Pinot score. You're coming to it for these like really beautiful formal elements. There is just like a kindness to it that I really appreciate, despite how like chaotic and vulgar so much of it is. It does find a tonal endpoint that I really love. It does communicate things, I think, just not necessarily in plot, but much more in tone.
And also in terms of rewatchability from that perspective, I do agree. I think Drive, through this, including his TV shows that I haven't even really seen, they are ones that if I had a big house and a projector, I would just have them on all the time, just for the vibes, visuals, and sound.
You were talking about like putting on something at a party. Like Her Private Hell is kind of almost exactly what you want for just like something's on in the background at a party. It's just like the most stunning images
absolutely
you've seen. I mean, like this is, I think at this point, comfortably one of my favorites of the year.
This is gonna be hell.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us to talk Her Private Hell, and thank you, Zach, for making this such a fun episode. You can find him on TikTok, Substack, and Letterboxd. Zach, if you want to share more.
Yeah, it's Zach on Art House on all platforms. If you're interested in more thoughts on Her Private Hell, I interviewed Matt Newman, the editor of the film, and you can find that on Substack in full, and I've been posting clips on TikTok as well. I have full reviews for a ton of recent films like Disclosure Day on both platforms as well, so you can check those out there.
So we'll include those links in our description, as well as the links to our TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd, both for Symphomaniacs and for Andrew's and my personal accounts. And you can find Andrew on Substack as well at Andrew Likes Movies.
You can visit my Substack to find reviews of new releases, personal blogs, and festival coverage. Zach, thank you again for joining us. You've been a real human being and a real hero.
All right, well, be sure to check out all of Zach's stuff, and we can't wait to talk to you next week. Bye.
Did you nut? Usually you